Can we start?
Unmuted.
All right, Oliver, ready to start?
Yes, of course.
Okay, good. I think we're all set. So it's 11:01 here. So first of all, welcome. I'm Professor Eusebius Cuernavaca from the Center for Digital Communications, Commerce, and Culture here at the University of Baltimore. It's a pleasure to be hosting this event. First of all, I want to thank my colleague, Professor Regina Bento, for making this possible, and also Oliver for making the time to come all the way from Ningbo in China to present this very interesting seminar to us. Just to understand how this is going to happen, the seminar is about 30 minutes, and we have two functions here on Zoom that you can use. One is our chat, which you can interact and among the participants, and the other one is our Q&A. So you can go, if you want to ask direct questions to Oliver, you can go to the Q&A and then post your questions, and this will be answered as the seminar goes, or at the end. That'll be at Oliver's discretion. So this has been a very interesting initiative. We have over 150 participants that registered to this from every single corner of the world. We didn't get anyone from Antarctica, Oliver, so sorry we didn't cover 7 continents, just 6, right? But it's been a very interesting and exciting initiative. I'll pass now the word to the Dean of the American School of Business, Murray Dial, to present our panelists, and then we go from there. Enjoy the seminar.
Well, thank you, Eusebio, and thank you everybody for joining with us today. I'm Murray Dial. I'm the Dean of the American School of Business. We're very proud to be hosting this. I want to thank particularly the Management Education and Development Division of Academy of Management for sponsoring this, particularly Miguel, Oliver Laasch from Clarion University, who's the chair. So thank you very much for making this happen. I'm joined here with the 2 liaisons for this who have sort of been facilitating getting going. You can just see her, Lisa Stickney, who's on my left hand. She's department head here, and that's why she's sitting right beside me, because her job is to keep me under control. And Regina Bento, can't see her, she's off camera, but she's orchestrating this to make sure it goes well. And I think this is a really important topic. I'm glad that we're spending time on it. I was reflecting recently that I've been having some discussions with some of the teenage children of friends of mine, and they're thinking about university, they're thinking about what they're going to do with their lives. I was thinking of what I was like at 18, and frankly 18, I wanted to change the world, and I wanted to make a positive difference. And I have to tell you that no one at that time actually advised me about going into business. Nobody said, go into business and do good. And I observe exactly the same thing happening when I'm talking today to my friends' children. Nobody is suggesting to them, if you want to make a difference in the world, you should actually go into business. And as a dean of a business school and somebody who's actually got 30 years experience actually working in business, I find that kind of disturbing. And so I think this topic is very important. Responsible management and learning education is very important for us. And that's why I'm also very pleased to have a real expert in this who can guide us and lead us and prompt us today. That's Oliver Laasch. Oliver's from Nottingham University Business School in China, so he's truly global, and he's also staying up very late, so I appreciate that. Oliver is a long-standing contributor to United Nations Principles of Responsible Management Education, PRIME, as we call it. He edits the Responsible Management Education book collection. He's coordinated UN working groups, founded the Center for Responsible Management Education. Oliver serves on the editorial board of the Academy of Management Learning and Education, and he's edited related special issues. I think it's just coming out, isn't it, the special issue for the Journal of Business Ethics, as well as in the past the Journal of Management Education. So welcome, Oliver. I'm going to pass it over to you. Just to remind you as the audience, If you want to have a discussion among yourselves as you're going along, do that in the chat window, as Eusebio pointed out. If you want to ask a question directly to Oliver, use the question and answer window on your Zoom. So Oliver, really excited to have you guide us in this. So over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Murray, and thank you also, of course, Miguel and Regina, thinking of me when you started to plan that first part of the Management Education and Development Divisions of AOM webinar series. So I feel very honored to be invited to this. I will share my screen just now to make sure you can actually see my presentation. Could I just check real quick? Can you guys see my presentation? Murray was
yes,
giving a
I can see it.
up. You can. Okay, excellent.
You can plug into the presentation mode on
Yes.
there we go, perfect.
There it is, right? Okay, excellent. So again, thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's I feel it's a real honor. And staying up late is definitely not an issue when it comes to being able to kind of share that topic that I'm very passionate about with a greater audience, and hopefully to inspire some of you to join that kind of community that is developing around responsible management and responsible management learning and education. So this is my real purpose for this webinar. I was asking you folks to type in a line or two to the chat window to see what you are actually looking for while being here. So please keep doing that. And afterwards, we're going to have the possibility to enter into a more active mode of discussion, and hopefully to get your questions through the Q&A function as well. Good. So what is responsible management learning education? And there I have to disappoint you for the first time, probably not the last. I do not know what it is for you or what it can be for you. I know quite well what it has become for me over the last almost 10 years now. I've been working on that topic. So I don't really need to repeat all of the nice things that Murray just mentioned in his introduction, those good memories. I just included one kind of collage in here of some of the things that I found were meaningful in the last 10 years. I actually joined the UN Prime in the first activity as a co-chair or co-coordinator of the Executive Education Working Group. You see there in the middle, and from there things really got rolling. Wrote quite a couple of textbooks, among others the first official UN Prime textbook, inspirational guides for the UN Prime initiative, did a Coursera MOOC on managing responsibly, which is still on if you're interested in it. Edited now, I think, 29 books of the UN Prime book collection, and so on. So I could keep going for a while. It's been a very exciting time. I will share this presentation afterwards as well. There are links in behind all of those pictures in case you're more interested in one or another of these, because we don't have enough time to really go deeply here. So one thing I should mention is that I have been working at quite a number of different Prime signatory schools. So right now, and for the last year and a half, I've been at the University of Nottingham in Ningbo, China, which is one of the Prime champion schools. So you might have heard that there's the scheme where leading schools in the Prime community join together and try to shape the community, be very active, proactive thought leaders and action leaders in the community. But also I've seen the kind of Prime startup process in the past when I was initiating it at my campus at the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico, and also have been working at Steinmetz University in Berlin, which was one of the very early members. So I'm saying this because I know I've seen many of the different stages of if you want to actually join the UN Prime Initiative as a school, and I'm very happy to, if you send me an email or ask questions, to share a little bit of my experience if you think that might be helpful. But today is actually more about things that are not Prime, although I want to start out with the UN Prime Principles, because this is where much of the discussion around this topic has started. And this is probably what also most of you people already do know about the topic. So these are the 6 principles of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Management Education. I will just quickly go through them to be on the same page with everybody. So the first one is around the purpose. So the purpose of these principles is to try as a business school to create change agents for a type of economy and, more widely thought, a type of world that we want to see. The second one then is more around the values, so values of sustainability, of responsibility, of ethics, as they're very concretely embedded into the UN Global Compact, which is mentioned there as a one kind of value set that might be helpful. Then method, which is around didactics, educational design, curriculum design, and so on. Research is about better understanding through research the organizations in which responsible management happens or doesn't happen, and to create knowledge around those topics. And then finally, the idea more concretely is in partnership, principle 5, to interact with managers to understand their challenges in managing responsibly just a little bit better. And principle 6, dialogue, then extends that to a broader stakeholder group, so also interact with different parts of society, local communities of business schools, students, of course, researchers, government, and so on. So this is the idea, to have all of those 6 principles, and while we're doing those, many of them are practices that we're doing in the academic environment, to do those practices responsibly and to do those practices with the goal of helping responsible managers to become exactly this, somebody who can be managing responsibly, and to help our students to become those managers. And then there's one interesting little phrase behind it. We understand that our own organizational values should serve as example of the values and attitudes we convey to our students. For me, that's principle 7, although officially that's not what it's called. Well, basically the idea here is to actually serve as a role model and to have as much the academic administration, but also questions of academic integrity being taken care of, so that we actually do practice what we preach as well in the academic practitioner community. Good. So this is the start from the UN Prime, but as you see on that slide, what I'm trying to convey here is the idea, well, it actually did not start with the UN Prime, of course. If you look at the left side, you see those fields of business ethics education, of education for sustainability, and then of responsible leadership and social entrepreneurship development or education as well. All 3 which are very often kind of absorbed partly into the practices that we call responsible management learning and education. So I'm saying this because it could sound like responsible management learning education wants to reinvent the wheel, and we're all of a sudden doing all those things. No, it's very much more a kind of reassembling, a kind of re-putting together, framing, integrating all of the great achievements of those fields and trying to address those topics together in a interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary way. If we want to kind of deconstruct but also reconstruct what this actually is a little bit more, this is my construction. So if I'm saying construction, I'm referring to this being something that's a kind of view that has developed through my interactions in that field through the last 10 years approximately. But this might look very different to you if you've been in that field for longer. It might become different after a while as well. But I want to share this because I feel that this is relevant for most of the people I'm speaking with. So on the left-hand side, you see those 3 areas or fields that we already talked about, or that I talked about just a moment ago: education for sustainability, S, education for responsible leadership, R for responsibility, and business ethics education, E for ethics. Typically I call these the SRE, so kind of a field between, like a transdiscipline that comes out of those 3 areas. And then through the practice of the UN Prime, what happens is that those 3 have been used together. They have been used into action There are intermediate ways of using these in education, and it becomes something that we then start calling responsible management education. And of course, the goal for responsible management education, if you look at the very right side, would be that ultimately people are able to do responsible management. So some kind of management centered on sustainability, responsibility, and ethics. But one thing I feel we've been missing for quite a while now is actually the responsible management learning part, because learning, well, that's a different thing from education. Of course, through education, we want to help people learn, but at the same time, learning very often does not happen in formal education. So learning, particularly for managers, happens when you're on the job, when you're talking to your colleagues, when you're challenged, when you're trying to solve a problem. So all of that learning is not a learning that happens in formal education most of the time. And this is what we, and if I say we, I'm particularly referring to most my colleague and me, who have been trying to insert that notion into that field for a little while now, because we feel that what we actually should be interested in is the learning. So if that learning happens through education and we can make more learning happen, great. But on the other hand, if that learning actually happens somewhere else, well, that shouldn't be less interesting to us, because it still achieves the same goal of having more responsible management. Going to be very quick on that one, although it looks rather complex. So the big picture point here is, well, what I just said, responsible management learning, that typically happens on the left-hand side, so that happens in the managerial community of practice. Responsible management education is more a practice or a bundle of practice that we do in the academic community of practice. But the point here really is, the challenge is to try to integrate those more, to find areas, to find practice, things that we can do in order to foster responsible management learning through our academic community of practice, and to learn one from another. Good. What we can see are, or what I think I've seen are 4 core themes that are a little bit further under the surface of the topic, not as obvious, but that are nevertheless there for me. So transdisciplinarity I already mentioned a couple of times. So we do have the disciplines or fields of sustainability, responsibility, and ethics involved. Although they're often used together, still these have different disciplinary backgrounds. So we have to somehow straddle these. We've got SRE as a field. Some people say, well, these are just basically the same, they belong together. And management. We've got management and education. So once again, it's a very, very interdisciplinary, or if you want, so transdisciplinary field, a new field emerging out of those disciplines. Pluralism is the second one. So for me, responsible management learning education is a quadrant of alternative management perspectives: humanistic management, critical management studies, native management style, managing for sustainability, and managing for responsibility, ethics management, and so on. All of those different managerial perspectives that are not just mainstream management as usual, neoclassic economic contextualized management practices. Inclusivity, on the one hand, trying to include all managers. This is something not specialized for the corporate responsibility manager or for the ethics officer. This is something that should be relevant for every manager as part of the managerial profession. But at the same time, of course, we include those more specialized responsible managers as well. And then also inclusive in terms of connecting to global as well as local issues. And finally, pragmatic, and pragmatic I mean in the sense of research philosophies, pragmatism or educational, or pragmatism as educational philosophy here. You're trying to solve real life problems. It's very often about the SDGs, SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which somebody already mentioned, or poverty, or more generally about the values that managers try to convey through their practices, something that Murray referred to just in his introduction. So let's co-construct the field. This is a call for contribution, or call for collaboration, for 5 open projects that I would like to invite you to get in touch about. The special issue in responsible management learning of the Journal of Business Ethics, still open for contributions. The work on the 2nd edition of the textbook Principles of Responsible Management. Also, we will have, in the last edition, we had about 70 contributors very often in small bits and pieces, up to whole chapters, so that's open. We just signed contracts for 2 handbooks, the SAGE and the Edward Elgar handbook, one on responsible management, law and education, and the other one on responsible management, and finally an open call for the UN Prime book collection now with Greenleaf and Routledge. And there we are. I'm on 15 minutes right now, so it's time for me to end up. Please do network, do get in touch, write emails, get in touch on LinkedIn, dig deep into the topic with the sources I'm mentioning down there, and yeah, let's start the discussion right now.
Right. So Oliver, let me start off a question, just to get this going. I mean, how do you think, or maybe you hope, that RMLE will develop in the future? I mean, what do you see as the possible scenarios?
Yes. Well, you're asking for possible scenarios. I'm not quite sure about how possible it is, but if you would ask me how I want to develop it and how I what kind of my ultimate purpose or fulfillment of purpose would be that we actually see sustainability, responsibility, and ethics not as something apart, not as something that we add on to management. So we do management and then we do a little bit of responsibility on top. No, the idea would be that we actually can drop the responsible and that we can say, well, management has those things already integrated, and that the kind of fulfillment of the societal role of a manager automatically becomes those 3 topics: sustainability, responsibility, and ethics, and that at the same time the kind of profession of management would already include that, and we don't really have to talk about it anymore as something part. So that would be my kind of dream. Hopefully that we will see happening at one point in time.
Okay, good.
Sure. Yeah, Oliver, thank you. Let me ask you a different question. Looking forward, what do you see as our role as academics in responsible management, learning, and education?
Yeah. I think we are in quite a special position as on the one hand we have the privilege of being able to influence a large number of young people every semester, every year. So I think on the one hand we are actually the people who could start creating that kind of critical mass of practitioners. And at the same time, if we look at research practices, well, we could start thinking about research not in terms of finding things out that are true, but rather as making things true that we want to be true. So I'm talking about that whole debate about performativity in research. So creating realities by showing possibilities. So saying, well, for instance, I'm working right now with a company which was very successfully introducing humanistic management practices, and many of their peers said, well, you just cannot do it. So what I hope to happen by publishing that study about their humanistic management business model, that other companies actually start making it true as well, because they've seen it can be true if you just start getting active for it. So that would be my idea of what our role could be through education and through research as well.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Should we maybe have a look at some of the participants' questions?
Sure.
And I must say, I thought I was too optimistic in terms of multitasking. I couldn't follow up the questions. So I was wondering if any of you folks had possibly seen a question that you thought was particularly interesting or promising. Could you possibly help me to identify something?
No, from the list on the discussion window. We have not.
We have one question that was coming
We're muted.
on the Q&A.
Yes.
Sorry, we're just coordinating a.
Yes, excellent.
This one here, I thought it was management, responsible management education. Since when there is a learning and why?
Okay, yeah. Well, that's the idea that we do have that missing area here. If we're talking about education, we only have on our screen. You only have the things that are formal educational initiatives. So we stay very much in the academic community of practice, but we miss a lot of the learning that is going on outside formal education. So by saying responsible management learning education, we hope to shine a light on that kind of neglected area that I believe we're missing so far. And also, of course, the idea is responsible management education is something that has very much emerged in the UN Prime context. So hopefully by including learning and education, which is more a Academy of Management framing, we might be able to also draw even that AOM community more into the discussion than if you stick to the little bit more narrow UN Prime framing.
I need 3 seconds to.
Yes.
Can you say it?
Yeah, I can read here. We have actually, Oliver, can you see the questions we have on the Q&A?
Yes, I can. Actually, I'm seeing Terrence's question from 12:24 a.m. here. Yes.
Yeah, the first one is at 11:24 from Edgar. Bella, what is responsibility and how to teach it, and how to business can demonstrate that? So can you? I think we can follow those questions and.
Yes. Can you just real quick repeat the time once again? I didn't catch you there.
The first question at 11:24 from Edgar Bella.
Just
11:24. Oh, okay.
It's in the Q&A.
It's in the Q&A window.
Oh, okay. So I'm in the chat right now. Okay. So,
Yeah.
so that okay. There are the Q&A. Okay, that's helpful.
Good.
So,
So far, college is working. So hey.
yes. So Edgar is asking, what is responsibility and how to teach it, and how business can demonstrate that? Ooh, that's a big question. So what is responsibility? I mean, I'm a constructionist, so I always believe responsibility is what responsibility means in your particular context and what you do. So I'm not a big fan of broad kind of catch-it-all definitions. So I think responsibility emerged in very local contexts. So if you're somebody working in accounting in India, responsibility means something very different from somebody who's working in accounting in the US, for instance. Or it might mean something very different for the person sitting right next to you in your office. So what I'm trying to do is, instead of defining what is responsibility, thinking about how can I find out what responsibility is, and there just looking at the kind of broader frameworks that can help you think about it. So for instance, the triple bottom line helps you think about environmental, social and economic responsibilities together. If you think about ethical decision-making theories, you might think about utilitarianism, for instance, or virtue ethics, which help you either to say, well, I want to maximize utility for everybody involved, for all stakeholders, or I might actually be consistent in my values, and that makes me somebody who's acting responsibly. So there I often think you can use those frameworks and those kind of cognitive tools to think about responsibility. But on the other hand, I also think for you personally, you will probably know what it means, and you will realize and have a feeling that you're irresponsible when you are. So that would be my answer to that. And then Harsh is asking, I like the way you link the capacity to contribute to SDGs as goal of RMLE. Can you discuss some practical and effective strategies for integrating SDGs in mainstream curricula? Would you recommend that all SDGs should be integrated in each program? Okay, so that's a couple of questions. Let me choose wisely there. So practical and effective strategies.
Oliver, may I just speak? It's 11:30
Yes.
now.
Okay.
This is a very interesting discussion, and I think, so people that only schedule 30 minutes, we'll have the session recorded, we'll have a transcript of the questions.
Yeah,
So, but for those that can stay, I think we can keep going. There are very interesting questions here, and I'm sure you'd be pleased to answer. So we keep going using the Q&A forum.
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Giuseppe, for highlighting that, because I might have forgotten as well. Okay, so SDGs. Yeah, so a couple of sources for how people actually did it. I know there's one really good paper on SDGs and responsible management education in the International Journal of Management Education, special issue on Prime that came out just this year. So have a look at that. Typically, I always see two ways of how to integrate it into the curriculum. The one is that you go through standalone courses, although SDG courses probably you cannot, or will be difficult for you to make a required course, so would need to be something that people pick voluntarily, but also to integrate those topics across the curriculum. So SDGs, you know, are very broad. So there will always be one or two SDGs that somehow fit into your topic. So for instance, in accounting, you might talk about the anti-corruption, bribery topics. If you're thinking about operations management, you might talk about environmental impact. If you think about human resources, you might talk about discrimination, human rights. So I think that kind of across the curriculum approach is the one that to my mind is more promising, but of course it requires a lot of commitment from all of the faculty teaching on those programs. But look at the Center for Responsible Management Education website, please. There's quite a number of resources and also blog posts we've written in the past about how to do those kind of integrative across the curriculum initiatives. And then Eleftheria was saying, isn't responsibility an inherent part of sustainability? How do they differ? Yes and no. And again, my opinion, there's many people who see that differently. But if you want to get a couple of good ideas, so for instance, Ivan Montiel is here probably still. He wrote a paper of those two topics converging increasingly in practice. Other people say, well, business ethics is the big kind of umbrella and the other ones are somewhere under it. So I prefer not to see it hierarchically. I prefer to see it as different fields that increasingly connect and interconnect and become something apart from those fields. So responsibility, for instance, originally, at least in the academic discussion, was very much related to CSR, sustainability very much to environmental management and sustainability management, and finally ethics very much to the ethics offices or ethics hotlines managing ethics of a company. So, but I think these are merging increasingly, and I hope that responsible management becomes kind of one space where they can merge in a way that makes sense to reflect practice. Elaborate principle 5 and 6. How can academic community impact industry practice? So to be explicit, that's of course not my principles. So these are the UN Prime principles. Principle 5 and 6. How to? Oh, you're particularly talking the academic community and the industry. Okay. So I think there's a number of things that you can do through teaching, for instance. So you could do internships, projects with companies where students learn and apply those topics inside the companies. You could do immersions, visits in companies, but also when you think about research, you could do action research projects, for instance, where you live with the people in the company and solve a concrete managerial problem related to SRE in those companies. You could also think about having company representatives in your executive programs, of course, and they could go back and change their practices. So I think there's kind of a whole bundle of things that you can do together, and where what we're seeing in the figure before, where those academic practices and the managerial practices can come together. And then anonymous attendee. Okay, Jim. Who's Jim? Okay, so this is more a comment, it's not a question, I'm believing. Then we've got Peter Gallo. For RML, are you looking for a focus on the integration of SRE, or would a deep dive into responsible leadership for manager be of interest? So for RML, I think the integration is very important because it opens up a kind of a buffet of options of how managers can put these SRE together in their particular practices. I think the responsible leadership field is very, very helpful, particularly when we're thinking about kind of people who are more interested in the CSR or social entrepreneurship area, also if they are in actually leading positions, although everybody can a leader, right? But as I understand that topic is being grown more out of some kind of leader position of power already. So that might restrict a little bit the kind of width of application that people can find in it. But again, there, I think if it works for somebody to enact their job more responsibly, and their job happens to be one that touches upon leadership, well, that label might work as well as responsible management. And then Sushanta Sarma is saying, how do you see the opportunity to promote PME related to research in emerging countries like India? So we just, I mean, one of the books I helped editing as editor of the UN Prime collection just this year, which just came out I think a month or two ago, was on responsible management education in India. Edited book, quite a number of contributions in there, so that I think is and very interesting research projects in there as well. And particularly in the Indian context, I know that there's a lot of legislation and standardization going on right now, which of course is an enormous driver for those topics. So doing research in that kind of very very vibrant environment where there's happening a lot right now, I think is very, very interesting. And as you might have seen before in the kind of inclusive part of responsible management learning education, one of the points is to integrate and to, well, not integrate is the wrong term. What I'm trying to say is to have perspectives on the topic from all different parts around the globe on the same level, coming together and shaping that area. And I think India, with its long history and tradition and different approaches to organizing and managing, should be able to make a very interesting contribution. And we do have actually quite a number of people from India who are active in that area as well. So if you want to send me an email, I could actually put you in touch with some of them in case you are not in touch with them anyway. And then, oh, we still got 12 open questions. I think I need to speed up a little bit. So Dum Chen is saying, what are some of the best practices to educate future business leaders about the risk of climate change? Look at the work of the UN Prime Working Group on climate change in education. If you go on the UN Prime website, you will see their materials, which are very helpful. So I don't want to go too deep into it right now. Then Taryn is asking, duplicate from the chat panel, how do you articulate the difference between responsibility and ethics in more traditional business school cultures where ethics is typically limited to one, maybe elective course? Yeah. Difference between responsibility and ethics. Well, I think there's two questions in there. One is about the actual difference between them, and the other one is about the question of elective or versus required courses. So for me, the difference is in the history and the framing and the concepts there. So responsibility, I would very much relate to topics like corporate social performance, social entrepreneurship models, responsible leadership, so the work that has been done on responsible leadership as well, often on an organizational level, while the business ethics or ethics area would rather see grounded in behavioral ethics, respectively a psychology background, then on the other hand more a philosophy, so a normative background, which gives you very different kind of mental models to work with. So that's why I would say, well, there's a clear difference where they come from, although you can apply these together. Standalone versus or elective versus required course. Of course, it would be great if there were required courses everywhere. Although I also feel it makes sense to have both of them, because I often see in the elective courses that there's people who are really, really interested in those topics, and they find each other in those electives because it is a self-selected group. And often the electives can be more specific in terms of the topics that you cover. Vernon Batcher is saying, I'm interested in getting our college to embrace RMLE. What do you suggest is the best way to sell to the college dean and then to the departments? I think there's different cases, if you want, so business cases for doing that, and they differ a lot in their attractiveness depending on what kind of college you are and what you do. So often I actually see that people in the leadership are interested in those topics anyway, so very often you can connect to personal motivation. If not so, I think there's also a clear business case in terms of positioning and saying, well, it's a differentiator to be part of a United Nations initiative. Often that label actually works very well and opens doors and creates visibility. But also joining the UN Prime for me was really joining a community of practice in terms of those topics and helped me to develop a lot, and I know it helped many of my colleagues to get into very interesting projects, as much research as education, to get to travel and help other people implement those topics to support research. So it's really also about creating kind of new spaces for development, which at the same time inside your school and outside your school connecting to the UN Prime community of practice. Good. Then should irresponsible leadership be irresponsible/responsible leadership be treated as a threshold concept? Oh yes. I don't want to go deeply into the concept itself, but refer to the Journal of Business Ethics paper, which deals with responsible management as a threshold concept. What I do agree is that when people really get what responsible management means, and typically if you do a good job they can, well, they will see management as a whole different. So I think that's the basic idea behind a threshold concept. Like once you've passed the threshold, the world looks a little bit different. Oh, Michael Pearson, hi. So Michael's saying, if you say responsibility is what others think it is, how is it different and helpful as a concept if folks think shareholder value maximization is the responsibility? Yes. So I'm not necessarily saying whatever you think is universally good and right. I'm rather saying that the kind of like your construction of responsibility somehow works together with everybody else's construction of responsibility, and in that interaction there will be something that then for you and the people around you becomes the responsibility, becomes legitimized, becomes taken for granted. I'm not trying to make a statement about shareholder value maximization responsibility is the preferable one if you look at it from a kind of bigger bird's eye view perspective. And then Doug is saying, thanks Oliver, great overview. What strategies do you offer to students who have embraced RMLE principles and join companies who have not yet embraced these concepts, perhaps even hostile to some extent? How do catalysts for change make an impact in organizations that have not yet begun the journey of responsible management? Thanks. And that was Doug Allen. Yeah, very good point. I think one methodology that works very well there is Mary Gentile's Giving Voice to Values, where it's really about, I think her framing is along the lines of how do you do the right thing if you know it's right, but your environment basically doesn't let you. It's very difficult to do the right thing. So she's built a whole methodology around that question, which I would recommend. Personally, I think it's a question about competence. So I think we have to, so I'm talking about competence in singular. So your competence as a person to interact with your environment and to do certain things, which for me includes a holistic type of education to create that competence. And this would be that you actually, we help people to know about things, to think about things, we help people to act, to interact with others, we help people to be somebody in a certain way. I'm talking about values, attitudes, and so on, and to become. So how to develop yourself and interacting with your environment. And I think if we are able to tie those together and to integrate those parts into our education for responsible management, that will create much more resilient people who are able to navigate those kind of hostile environments. An area I like particularly is the idea of job crafting, that you actually kind of create your bubble, your responsible bubble around you by shaping your job environment first, and then that might actually resonate with others and might start changing your wider environment. Ira Kaufman is saying, I'm interested how RMLE is including soft skills, empathy, trust, divergent thinking, purposeful design thinking, digital transformation, network thinking, data-driven decision making, and so on. So again, I would refer to something that Dirk Moosmeyer and I did recently, which is a structured literature review of what people have called competence, different areas, different things that you need in order to act responsibly. And I would say probably your entire list, if I look at it again, is inside that framework. So it might help you to reframe that. Then there's Lourdes White from the Accounting Faculty of the University of Baltimore. Interested in pedagogies that are most impactful for SRE learning. How do pedagogies such as case studies, role-playing, learning journals, study of heroes, etc., compare in terms of their effectiveness for MBAs? I can only say that for me the mixture is what makes it effective. I don't think either one of these, if you just use them alone, I think they're all effective used alone, but I think they will be more effective if you're able to tie them together. Once again, this idea of covering different areas of what makes you a responsible manager, those 6 areas that I mentioned before. So for me, all educational methodologies relate more to one of those 6, or maybe 2 of those 6, and leave out others. So for me, it's about mixing them together so that you actually cover all of those 6 I mentioned before. Then Ruben Borga is saying, communities of practice are important. Which ones, in your opinion, are leading the RMLE initiatives? Well, PRME is very often called a network of networks, reflecting those different communities of practices involved into it. So that would be the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative, for instance. It is the big accreditation agencies. It is the Academy of Business and Society, ABIS, and so on. So if you look at their website, you will see all of the members of the steering committee of the UN Prime. So these are all good communities, very active ones. Then there's the Prime Champion Schools, which are meant to be very active in leading, so that would be communities of practice inside those schools. And then, but for me, the one we really keep missing, and that's unfortunately the very community we're trying to influence with what we're doing, are the different communities of practice in management. So that would be the human resource folks. That would be, if you want to define it regionally, that would be the responsible managers in China. So for me, we need much more focus on what managers are actually doing and how they change, how they learn, how they reinstitutionalize what management is. So this is for me the most powerful one, but also the one that we're largely missing. Then Ira Kaufman is saying, what business schools have adopted your curriculum and what have been the results? If you say your curriculum, I am assuming you're referring to our textbook. Tell me if that's not the case, then I will slightly change my answer. So the textbook has been used in 2 different ways. The one is the classical standalone business and society courses, or business ethics courses, or corporate sustainability courses, or sustainable leadership courses. But then what I find more exciting is actually when it's being used for introduction to management, or introduction to business school, or introduction to business courses. And this appear, according to the numbers from Cengage, the publisher, this appeared to be about half of the courses, which I find really good, that say, well, we actually want to have our students learn management the responsible way from the very beginning. So we're not going to use a mainstream management textbook for our introduction to management or business, but we're going to use one that integrates sustainability, responsibility, and ethics from the very beginning. So that for me is something that's very promising. In terms of success, I mean, I can only talk about the anecdotal evidence I have from some of the people I'm in touch with who use it. Often people say it is Well, there's a good thing and a bad thing about it. One thing is people say it's not radical enough sometimes. They say it's too much still in the kind of traditional schemes of management. So we talk about, for instance, not normal strategic management, how to integrate those topics, while other people say, well, you should actually rethink if you need strategic management, if that actually shouldn't be not competition-based, but collaboration-based, for instance. So some people say it's not radical enough and we're not going far enough yet, but other people actually say it's quite successful in starting that transition from a very purely commercial, very profit-maximizing, a very neoliberal type of management towards one that might be more sustainable, responsible, and ethical, so more kind of a step towards it. Then Edgar Bello is saying, is really capitalism in danger if 21st century businesses cannot be responsible, as Stuart Hart was saying a few years ago. Can they not be responsible? I'm not sure. Actually, I just realized I swapped, I didn't see Claire's question there. I'm going to come to that just in a moment. So Edgar, I'm not quite sure. I do see, of course, I've got a skewed vision as well, because I'm looking for these businesses. I do see quite a number of businesses that can be radically different, and of course they're still tied to the same economic system that requires certain things. The commercial logic is a very strong one. That the capitalist commercial logic is a very strong one. But at the same time, I increasingly see those kind of incredible beasts, which I'm trying to find and communicate further, where companies successfully do it very, very differently. And I think if we have, as academics, are able to promote through our activities towards the students, through our research and publications, that this is actually possible, well, I think responsibility is a possibility as well. Then Claire asked, do you see the rising generation of leaders, millennials, as having different mindsets about business for doing good, especially in a counter-responsible management political climate as currently in the US? One thing that makes me think millennials are very different is that, and they are very receptive for those topics, is that in the conversations I have had with particularly global compact companies, one of the recurrent theme was that they said, well, once you put something that says sustainability, responsibility, ethics, entrepreneurship, social impact into the job description, the number of applicants actually doubles to triples. And they very often are not even able to provide enough jobs with those kind of characteristics, and they start recrafting what their jobs look like in order to attract more talent who seem to be interested in those topics. So that makes me very kind of positive in terms of those attitudes. Oh, and that June, it's good to see you again. She's saying, thank you so much for organizing this webinar. It's wonderful that you have initiated this online global RMLE research community with 150 participants. Going forward, do you plan to hold further webinars? If so, when might these be held? On a quarterly basis? Will they be of a similar nature? It would be great to build on this integrative initiative. Thanks again. No, thanks, Annette, for you for joining in, and also for your kind of service to that community, among others in the at the AWM last year. Well, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer this, but the MED division, Miguel, who's online there, as I understand it, start this webinar series. I'm not quite sure, though, how frequent it will be and to what degree the topic of responsible management, learning, education will come up again. But then again, those things can always be organized. So if you're actually interested in this happening, well, you could team up with a person or two and to even organize a parallel webinar series where we do that. And with the Center for Responsible Management Education, there's a great platform for doing those kind of things. There have been a number of initiatives in the past that started in a very similar way. Oh, and Petra is here, Petra Moulton-Hill. Actually, I was in one of the previous questions, I was referring to your UN Prime Working Group on climate change. So I don't quite remember who asked the question, but if you are still here, get in touch with Petra, who's here. She's the coordinator of that working group, and will have really great advice on how to bring climate change topics into the curriculum and into your schools. So Petra is saying, which article paper would you recommend as a good overview of the different approaches in embedding responsible management education? I haven't come across one article or paper. There's loads of articles that can be used together, each of them describing a different technique. And if you look at the responsible management learning education literature base on responsiblemanagement.net, we have all of the papers that somehow, or papers and publications generally, that explicitly refer to responsible management or prime or responsible education or responsible management learning in one list. So if you look through them, you will find probably about 20 different papers that address that topic. What I think works really well, and I want to say you contributed to that one as well, Jen Lee's book that came out last year with Greenleaf, which is on different educational techniques, pedagogies, and so on for bringing it into educational designs. And then Ira Kaufman is saying, thanks for all the response on using your text. Is there an entire business school that has created a degree MBA based on your approach? I do not think so. I mean, not in terms of using the book and the approach for creating something new, but I know that, for instance, Erasmus Rotterdam just has adopted the book as for a required course of I think 1,500 students or so, and there were plans as well to let it run through the whole curriculum. So this is one interesting example to connect to. And also I have to say the approach we have in the book is not entirely new. So to show responsible management through all of the managerial functions, so to show it through accounting and human resources and strategy and operations and supply chain has been done before. So for instance, Michelle Weibrecht's book that came out in 2010, the Sustainable MBA, did exactly this, although in a very different way, and it's not a textbook. But I know that there's a number of degree programs that actually have that kind of functional approach, but I couldn't claim that this is because we published this book. So for instance, Steinbeis University in Berlin, where I used to work for a while, have a general management course, which is almost a third of the curriculum, which goes exactly like this, the functions. And many and also the MBA program at Lüneburg University in Germany does the same thing. I've seen a number of curricula being built in the same way over the last couple of years, so that's something that's not uncommon. And then Ekaterina is saying, thanks a lot for sharing your passion with us. Love the idea of the 7th prime principle. We'll definitely share it with colleagues in other communities of practice. Yeah, thanks for that comment. And Edgar's saying, thanks a lot, Oliver. We need more of these webinars in SRE to change our business school environment and promote new type of leadership. Yes, Edgar, team up with Nat Pantry. Let me know if you folks have any concrete plans on how to make it happen. I would be very happy to support that through the Center for Responsible Management Education, and maybe MED might also be interested in making that a more recurrent theme in the coming events as well. Yes, excellent. So we made it down to the bottom.
Right.
Just took us an hour overall. Yay. Thank you so much for your questions. I think that was really inspiring and really interesting.
Well, thank Oliver. Oliver, thank you. And I like the combination of giving some provocative thought with also very pragmatic advice about where to look to take things forward. And
yes,
and it looks also that we have kind of created a community here, which I hope we will be able to find a way of continuing it.
Yes.
And just to reinforce that for the community, this is going to be available. You'll be able to download it and review it. If you haven't written up all the references, you'll be able to do that again. And I think that this format, I think, is a very interesting format that MED Division of Planning and Management wants to continue. So we are going to sponsor another one like this, probably late March, early April. Ben Arbo has agreed to do it, just heard that. He's going to talk about challenges and opportunities in business and management education. Many people know him. He's a former editor of RMLE, and he was the chair of the Management Education Development Division as well. He's a real leader in management education. So I think that'll be a great session. Look out for that. And I really want to thank everybody for participating. I'm glad we could do that. And Oliver, again, thank you for spending so much time. Okay.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you for leading this. Okay, McGraw as well. So thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. And please be in touch if there's more questions. Just then shoot me a line, or be in touch on LinkedIn.
All right, thank you so much.
Right.
And I think it was a fantastic opportunity. Thank you all for joining us. We actually had a very good attendance from, like I said, every single corner of the world. Thank you for all of you that stayed until late. As we indicated early, we'll have the recording and also the transcripts of the questions and so forth available. We'll be sending to everyone that actually registered, so we have your email. And as I said, we are very happy to be hosting Regina. Thanks again for, and Miguel to make this possible. In the Center of the Digital Communication Schools and Culture here at the University of Baltimore is more than happy to provide the platform to do this. So see you next time. Thanks again. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.